What is up, everybody? Corey's Bloody History. So, I asked if you guys wanted to hear something different. We've been doing some Jack Ruby. We got a lot of Jack Ruby to go. We'll be on Jack Ruby for fucking 10 years. I mean, considering I've got about 16,000 pages left to go. But what I do when I have long stuff like this, which we're not going to do all 16,000, I'm going to end up skimming some of it. But we'll do a big chunk of it. But I asked if anybody wanted to see anything else this week or hear anything else this week, and I didn't get any replies. So we're going to continue on with Jack Ruby as of today. Now, for the rest of this month, if you're listening to this, I normally sell my signed copies of A Warning from History for $50 shipped in America. And I also do my Bloody History Substack on World War II, which is a pay premium kind of platform. And so what I'm going to do for the remainder of August, anybody who signs up for my Bloody History Substack pays for the full year for $50. Okay? If you sign up for my Substack and you pay for the full year for $50, I will send you a signed copy of my book. Okay? That's the promotion that I'm doing this month and this month only. Actually, I've only got about 44 copies of my book sitting here. So, 44 opportunities to get a free copy of my book signed. Anybody who signs up for my Bloody History Substack, which is bloodyhistory.substack.com, and not the $5 a month one. You got to buy the whole year for $50. And then I will reach out to you, and I will get an address from you, and I will send you a copy of the book signed. That is this month's promotion. So please, do yourself a favor and do me a favor. Go over to bloodyhistory.substack.com and sign up for the year for $50 and get a copy of my book. It's going to be that simple. So, all right, so let me get back to Jack Ruby. 1126. The heading on all these is the same, Jack Ruby and Lee Harvey Oswald. It is noted that on November 22, 1963, Jack Begun, B-E-G-U-N, Chicago fight manager and former associate of Ruby, advised S.A. John R. Bassett claimed that Ruby, well acquainted with one Feifel, F-I-E-F-E-L, who owned a junkyard near Wrigley Field. On November 26, 1963, Phil looks like Udell, U-D-E-L-L, also known as Feifel, owner of Lakewood Iron and Metal Company, 1305 West Belmont, advised S.A. Bassett he had known Sparky Rubenstein for approximately 35 years. Udell described Ruby as a clean-cut individual who did possess a hot temper and was good with his fists, but who was, however, 100% patriotic. Udell stated that Ruby was a ticket scalper and all-around hustler who was not connected to organized crime or the syndicate in Chicago. Udell recalled Ruby was a partner of Harry Epstein in a punchboard business. Udell admits knowing Lenny Patrick, West Side hoodlum, and stated Rubenstein also knew Patrick, claimed, however, neither worked for Patrick. Recalled Ruby obtained job with Scrap Metal Union from man who later killed and replaced by Paul Dorfman. Udell recalled during approximately 1940, he and Ruby and others were en route to boxing match at White City when they approached a small Nazi Bund rally consisting of uniformed Bund members. Udell recalled this irritated the group and they broke up the meeting. Udell concluded by describing Ruby as a sports fan, a ladies' man who enjoyed dancing, and a clean-living individual who neither drank nor smoked. He stated he was shocked over the murder of Oswald by Ruby and stated it was his opinion that Ruby was simply overwhelmed with sorrow at the president's death inasmuch as he had easy access to the Dallas Police Department. He committed an act which, quote, a lot of us would have liked to have done, unquote. So here again, once again, we have these weird conflicting description of Ruby, right? This one said that he was a ladies' man. Who was it that said he was a homosexual? A couple people, right? Jack Leon Ruby, dated 11/29/63. Re Dallas in Chicago tells November 28 last. Re telephone call from Cuba. Redacted, toll unit number 2, Southern Bell Telephone and Telegraph Company, today advised S.A. Layman L. Stafford that calls from Cuba are handled through the Miami office except those to Chicago, Washington, D.C., Los Angeles, Newark, Boston, and New York, which are handled through New York City. She advised the check of all canceled tickets from Cuba does not reflect any uncompleted calls from Cuba for a Rubenstein on November 24 last. To determine completed calls will require extensive review of microfilm records, and this will be done. Re-Miami telephone JE 8-4082. This is listed number of Samuel Tannenbaum, 911 Meridian Avenue, Miami Beach. Tannenbaum today advised S.A. Robert K. Lewis that he has a son, Harold Tannenbaum, 6027 Chef Menteur Highway, New Orleans, Louisiana. Harold has managed a New Orleans nightclub for several years, but is presently unemployed. On visit to Miami Beach approximately 4 weeks ago, he mentioned to Samuel that he might manage a club for Jack Ruby in Dallas. Harold returned to New Orleans, and shortly after, Samuel received a telephone call from Ruby asking for Harold. Ruby was given Harold's present address, and Samuel has no additional info and never met Ruby and does not know if Harold ever actually met him. Sonia Jaffe interview November 28 last by S.A. Robert K. Lewis. Re-Miami teletype 4:05 p.m. 11:27 last. Garcia and wife interviewed by S.A. Thomas Arion, Errion. Note, Mrs. Garcia recalls only the name Jack Ruby as a hotel guest. Page 3, Re-Miami teletype, 12:07 a.m., 11:28:63. Re-Dave Yaris. Mrs. Yaris and attorney Max Lurie interviewed by S.A. Robert K. Lewis. 11:29:63. Jack Leon Ruby and Lee Harvey Oswald, a.k.a. victim. Re-Murad, November 25th last in Los Angeles, Airtel to Bureau, November 25 last. Background, records Hilton Hawaii Village Hotel examined today reveal number 1961 registration for subject as Ruby or Rubenstein. No additional logical leads to verify subject's alleged visit to Honolulu, June of 61, and to identify 2 unknown males accompanying him. Okay, so I'm sorry. Let me back up just to the previous one. So we now have in the Jack Ruby file, we have the acknowledgement here that we have Dave Yaris, Lenny Patrick, a whole bunch of mobsters, Paul Dorfman, all being mentioned in the Jack Ruby files, right? But everyone's like, oh no, Jack Ruby didn't know any mobsters. Dave Yaris, I place between the pergola and the fence, firing the shot that was eventually dug out of the ground, that missed and was dug out of the ground and never seen again, right? Ralph Paul, associate of Ruby. Thank you very much to Jim, who found the obituary of Ralph Paul John. I mentioned him last time because the first time I read Ralph Paul John's obituary, it just struck me that was this Ralph Paul. Could I be wrong? Of course I can be wrong. Do I think I'm wrong? I don't think I'm wrong because Ralph Paul's nickname around Austin's barbecue was Johnny. They called him Johnny. Why the fuck would they call Ralph Paul Johnny? And I happened to find a Ralph Paul John, right? So to me, it seems to make sense, but I have to do some more digging, find out about Ralph Paul's military background and compare it to what's in this obituary. Of course, the obituary isn't going to mention owning titty bars and being an associate of Jack Ruby, right? Investigation at 2121 Cedar Avenue, Bronx, New York. The address furnished in Newark Tel reflects brother Louis Paul. As of the afternoon of 11/29 instant, was at his place of business, Pleasant Finance Company, Lodi, New Jersey. Sister Lee Paul Berry was also there. Newark has been requested by Retail Call 1129 Instant to interview Lewis Paul and Lee Paul Berry at Lodi, New Jersey. All right, next one. Looks like an internal memorandum to Mr. Belmont from A. Rosen, dated 11/25/63. Relative to the notification of police, sheriff's office, and Secret Service by the Dallas office after receipt of the anonymous telephone call indicating that Oswald would be killed while being moved to the county jail, SAC Shanklin furnished the following details. The call was received at 2:30 a.m. on November 24th. Okay, hang on a second. The call was received 2:30 a.m. on November 24th. What does this coincide with? This coincides with Jack Ruby getting back to Dallas, right? And then the whole story about him and Larry Crawford and George Senator going out to see the billboard, right? That whole fucking story, which we'll cover at some point. But I think that story is bullshit, and I think what really happened is that he got back from his trip to Houston and Galveston around 2:30 or maybe a little earlier, November 24th. Because he most certainly was in Houston and Galveston, which no researcher anywhere has ever figured out. A memorandum was immediately prepared reflecting this call, and at 3 a.m. the sheriff's office was telephonically advised of the receipt of the call and its contents. At that time, the sheriff's office advised that they had received a similar call and that security precautions would be taken. At 3:20 a.m., Captain W.B. Frazier, who was in charge of the Dallas Police Department at the time, was telephonically advised of the receipt of the anonymous call and its contents. He, at that time, stated he would see to it that this information was immediately given to Chief Curry, and he felt certain that in view of this information, there would be a change of plans relative to the transfer of the prisoner Oswald. At 8:15 a.m., SAC Shanklin personally called Chief Curry and repeated the information relative to receipt of the anonymous call and its contents. Chief Curry advised that he had already been advised of this by Captain Frazier and that they were taking all necessary precautions. He told Shanklin he had 2 armored cars which would be brought into the basement of the jail and that no one would know which car Oswald would be placed in. SAC Shanklin advised that the Dallas office and he personally had made several attempts to notify the Secret Service agent in Dallas, but were unable to reach him at his home or at his office. It's Forrest Sorrells, right? So that's a good one. This is indicating that there was that call made. It was obviously made by Jack Ruby. The confusion over Jack Ruby's... I'm going to have to write this up as a chapter for the update to my book. I don't really think I have a choice at this point. I mean, it is the conclusion to the story in the short term, right? But ultimately, Jack Ruby was led into the basement of the police department by George Butler, right? George Butler let Jack Ruby in, and he was his oldest, longest friend, right? We even came across George Butler's name as having interacted with Ruby outside of Dallas in these documents that we've been going over. At 3:20 a.m., Captain W.B. Frazier, who was in charge of the Dallas Police... Oh, we already read that one. I got that one. All right, here we go. 11:26. It's 1963. Urgent. Redacted. Long Distance Southern Bell Telephone Company, SBTT, Atlanta, advised today, approximately 3 weeks ago on Redacted. A Sunday evening, she placed a long-distance call to Lee Harvey Oswald at New Orleans, Louisiana, for a person using a credit card with numbers ending in S32. She stated she recalled this was placed from the Dogwood Motel, Chambly, Georgia. She requested information in New Orleans to obtain Lee Harvey Oswald's telephone number, and repeated efforts to contact this number for Oswald were unsuccessful. Caller then gave her Dallas number for Oswald and efforts unsuccessful to reach Oswald in Dallas. Caller then had her again call the New Orleans number and Oswald not contacted. This makes me have pause. Because technically Oswald was never in Dallas, he was in Fort Worth. And anybody who would be trying to contact Oswald would know whether or not he was in Dallas or Fort Worth. And he didn't have any friends short term, right? So these, to me, reek of some kind of like fake phone calls. Like phone calls that were actually made, but made not by people who actually knew Oswald, but as part of some op. At approximately 10 p.m., the same person using credit card number requested her to call Oswald in Dallas, Texas, at which time call was completed. Redacted stated caller using same credit card number then attempted to reach Jack Rubenstein at a number furnished by him in Dallas, Texas. No one answered telephone, and caller asked her to contact information in Dallas for telephone number of Jack Rubenstein or Jack Ruby, stating everyone in Dallas would know him as he operated a nightclub. Redacted advised the information operator was able to furnish her a telephone number, and no one answered this telephone. Caller then instructed her to call Jack Rubenstein's sister, Myrtle, in Dallas, Texas, furnishing a number. Call was completed. Approximately 1 p.m., same person using same credit card number placed call to Dallas, Texas for Jack Rubenstein, and call was completed. Records of Dogwood Motel, Chamblee, Georgia. Month of November failed to verify statements made by telephone operator concerning calls to Dallas and New Orleans. Hang on, let me reread that. For month of November, failed to verify statements made by telephone operator concerning calls to Dallas and New Orleans. Records checked SBTT, Atlanta, Georgia, for canceled calls on November 3, 10, and 17. Failed to reveal any canceled cards reflecting calls mentioned by telephone operator. Redacted has approximately 20 years experience with SBTT and resides with mother and was very emotional concerning assassination of President Kennedy. She stated she had been watching television continually concerning the events in Washington and Dallas. She stated she was watching TV at time Ruby shot Oswald, and she noticed just prior to Ruby shooting Oswald, Oswald appeared to recognize him. You see, I don't think so. I don't think so at all. When you watch it, you'll see that Oswald will look at Ruby and then look directly back in front of him as though he didn't recognize him. So some people will say the fact that he looked at him is the recognition. I don't think so at all. Impression of interviewing agents that redacted highly emotional and reliability is questioned. T.A. King, State Security Officer, SBT, and T advised highly improbable same operator would have received and placed all of the above described calls. New Orleans ascertain if telephone has been listed for Lee Harvey Oswald in New Orleans. That telephone operator would have furnished to operator in Atlanta. Dallas will contact information operators in Dallas to determine if any calls have been received questioning telephone number of Jack Rubenstein or Jack Rubin during Sunday evening, November 3, 10, or 17. Information copy furnished Washington, D.C., and as much as telephone credit cards ending in 32 issued in Washington, D.C. Telephone credit cards that ended in 32 are issued in Washington, D.C. That's fucking hilarious. Hilarious. All right, 11/28/63. Urgent. Chicago teletype to Bureau, Dallas and Los Angeles. November 28 instant. Alleged communist activities. All right. Erwin Burke, Berke. True name Birkenstadt. 5807 Alcove, North Hollywood, California. Contacted November 28 instant by S.A. Eugene Tuggy. He is the owner of Burke's Charcoal Broiler Restaurant, 5338 Laurel Canyon Boulevard, Los Angeles. Burke's originally from Chicago, and in 1936 began operating as a song plugger, at which time he was employed by Shapiro Bernstein Music Publishers, 54 West Randolph Street, Chicago. Burke has a vague recollection of a slight association with a Jack Ruby, who he understood to be Jack Rubenstein. Burke cannot recall this man's image, but does feel that possibly this Rubenstein was associated with one Jack Howard, who worked in the same building as a song plugger. Well, I don't know, what is a song plugger? He stated that to further identify Howard, he recalled that Howard in about 1945 had a music store in the Loop End building next to the Chicago Theater on State Street, which business is no longer in existence. Howard had a brother whose name Burke could not recall, but who believed was connected with the hoodlum element and also worked with Jack Howard in the song plugging business. Burke stated that if he is correct in his recollection, this Jack Ruby that he recalls was associated with Jack Howard and his brother in the song plugging business. Burke has seen pictures of Jack Ruby from Dallas and does not recognize him from his current pictures as anyone he knew in Chicago. He advised that possibly from an older picture of Jack Ruby taken during the 40s, he could definitely determine if Jack Ruby from Dallas is the man he was in, has reference to as being in business with Howard. Burke advised that he married Rosalind Jaffe in Chicago, Illinois in 1939. A year after their marriage, his wife's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Sam Jaffe, moved to Muncie, Indiana, where Sam Jaffe went to work for his nephew Lawson Jaffe in a jewelry store. Lawson Jaffe owned the building in which the jewelry store was located. Lawson Jaffe sold this store after World War II, and Sam Jaffe thereafter opened a jewelry store on the second floor of the same building. Sam Jaffe, also after the sale of Lawson Jaffe's jewelry store, managed the building for Lawson Jaffe and collected the rent. Burke does recall that there was some kind of a hall on the third floor of this building. He stated that he recalls no meetings that were ever held in this hall, as it was a miserable place. Burke and his wife made numerous trips from Chicago to Muncie during the period before the war and after Mr. Burke's discharge from the service, and at no time did he ever travel with or take with him any individual by the name of Jack Rubenstein or Jack Ruby. Burke advised that Philip Jasser, Jasser, Herbert, and Morton Pizzol and Morton Stant were all in business associates in Muncie, Indiana, of Lawson and Sam Jaffe. Burke knows of no Communist Party meetings or communist-type meetings ever held in the hall over the jewelry store and does not know of any of the aforementioned people to be involved in any communist activity. Burke suggested that Marty Brin, who he believes is presently a salesman for a beer company in Chicago, would possibly know the Jack Ruby he has reference to as being connected with Jack Howard. He advised that Brin, during the time involved, had a tavern in the 54 West Randolph Street building and knew most of the people in and around Randolph Street. Chicago will locate and interview Marty Brin, if not already handled. November 28, 63. Reference Jack Rubenstein's mother's medical history and Ruby's mother. Redacted medical records section. Elgin State Hospital, Elgin, Illinois, advised S.A. Harry Walker on November 27, 63, that the following information is located in the medical records section files on microfilms under Elgin State Hospital, number 46464, concerning Mrs. Fanny Rubenstein, a.k.a. Fanny Rubenstein. Fanny Rubenstein, wife of Joseph R. Rubenstein, living, age 63, was admitted to the Elgin State Hospital from the County Court of Cook County on July 16, 1937, with her mental illness being described as senile deterioration, senile state, at the time of admission. She was described as being born in 1875. Date not listed. In Russia, city or area not listed, and being of the Jewish religion and of the Hebrew race. Well, not quite. She's from Poland. She was 62 years old at the time of admission and resided at 624 South Independence Boulevard, Chicago, Illinois, residing in Chicago. The last 32 years, she was listed as having 8 living children and 1 deceased child. The living children are as follows. Hyman Rubenstein, son, age 35, residing at home. Anna Volport, daughter. This could possibly be spelled Volpert or Valpert, as it's not clear on the film. Age 33. 2510 North Kedzie Avenue, Chicago. Marion Rubenstein, daughter, age 31. Eva Grant, daughter, age 28. Jack Rubenstein, son, age 26. Listed as a traveling salesman. Sam Rubenstein, son, age 24, residing at home. Earl Rubenstein, son, age 21, residing at home. Eileen Rubenstein, daughter, age 20, residing at home. All right, so You don't see many references to Sam Rubenstein or Samuel Rubenstein. Rubenstein was brought to the Elgin State Hospital by the Cook County, Illinois Sheriff's Office at the advice of a doctor at the Michael Reese Hospital in Chicago, where she had been attending clinics for many years. She was described as becoming unmanageable and getting into hysterics and screams and shouts both day and night. The hospital authorities received information from daughter Marion Rubenstein that the Michael Reese Hospital should have a complete record of Frances Rubenstein. In the family and personal history section of the file, it was reported that Frances Rubenstein died in Russia from old age, and she has one brother, name not listed, living in Denver, Colorado. As to education, it was reported that she is illiterate and speaks little English. Marion Rubenstein, daughter, described Frances as having being very temperamental, domineering, and self-willed, and to have her own way. According to Marion, if her mother's wishes were not granted, she went into a regular tantrum, became disagreeable, and very unfair. She was described by Marion as never taking much interest in her children's welfare. In a letter dated July 16, 1937, the Michael Reese Hospital, Chicago, Illinois, reported that Fanny Rubenstein has been known to the Michael Reese Hospital since 1926 due to her complaining of a sticking sensation in her throat over a 15-year period, which she insisted was a fishbone. She was diagnosed at the psychiatry clinic of the hospital as having a psychoneurosis with marked anxiety state. The letter further reported that since 1926, Fanny Rubenstein returned to the psychiatry clinic of the Michael Reese Hospital at intervals, sometimes voluntarily. And in the past 4 years, at the request of her son and daughter, they found her behavior increasingly difficult in the house. During the past 4 years, according to the letter, Fanny has been exceedingly quarrelsome, used profanity, and was very markedly suspicious of the motives of her family, and constantly expressed the idea that her sons are conspiring against her and influencing the other children to be impatient and cruel toward her. In another report at the hospital dated August 12, 1937, it was stated that Fanny, in an interview with hospital authorities, gave her age as 62 and born in Poland in October, but could not give the year. This report, which differs from information in other sections of the file and which is set out above, states that Fanny advised she also has 2 sisters in Poland in addition to her brother in Denver. 2 other sisters, according to Fanny, died in infancy, and another sister died in Poland of malnutrition during the war. She claimed to be married to Joseph Rubenstein at the age of 24 when he was 30. And the match was made as customary through a professional matchmaker, and her marriage to Joseph was an unhappy marriage. The file reflected that Fanny's deceased child died at the age of 20 months due to scalding. It was noted that Fanny Rubenstein was illiterate and that she speaks very little English. She was questioned at the hospital, according to the records, in, quote, Jewish, unquote, by a doctor. Dr. Redacted, first name not entered. In October 1937, date not entered, Fanny Rubenstein was entered in the records as an escape from the hospital. She was then placed on parole for 90 days by the hospital on October 17th, 1937. To her daughter, Marion Rubenstein, 624 Independence Boulevard, Chicago. Redacted explained that apparently Marion Rubenstein was located at the above address in Chicago. Therefore, as was the custom of the authorities at the time, Miss Rubenstein was placed on parole for 90 days in the care of her daughter. She, at that time, was entered into the records as improved, however, was still in a paranoid state. On January 14th, 1938, Fanny was entered on the records as returned from escape and parole due to a request from her family because she was uncooperative and caused constant discord in the family and was noisy and was using obscene language. Fanny Rubenstein, on May 27, 1938, was again paroled for 90 days to her daughter, Ann Volport, 3806 Washington Boulevard, Chicago, Illinois, as improved. She was still described as being in a paranoid state with an unfavorable prognosis. The last information in the files reflected a monthly progress report from the Illinois Department of Public Welfare dated August 23, 1938, which was, at that time, at the end of the 90-day parole. It was reported that Marion Rubenstein, daughter, advised that she was living with Fanny at 3884 West End Avenue, Chicago, and that Fanny was getting along much better, even going to the park during the day. Reports stated that Fanny, however, does not go back to 624 South Independence Boulevard, Chicago, where her husband and children live. Therefore, much trouble has been avoided. Redacted stated that her records reflect that Fanny Rubenstein, on August 25, 1938, received an absolute discharge from the hospital as improved. In addition to the above, Fanny Rubenstein was further described as white female, 4 foot 6 inches, 182 pounds, build obese, hair red, eyes blue. All right, next one. This is FBI memo, November 24th, to Mr. Tolson, Mr. Clyde Tolson, from Mr. Belmont, subject Jack Ruby and Lee Harvey Oswald. At 3:15 p.m., ASIC Clark of Dallas called to advise that U.S. Attorney has sent an assistant U.S. attorney over to the office to sit in on all conferences in the Ruby case with the instructions that he is to stay with the SAC to know all instructions given, etc., that this was in accordance with the Attorney General's order. He said that further, the head of the criminal division is the department flying down to Dallas. I told ASIC Clark that he should advise the U.S. Attorney that we would consult with the U.S. Attorney on any legal matters or policies or procedures under the statute, but that we would run the investigation in this matter, and it was not feasible or practical for an assistant U.S. Attorney or anyone else to be in the office. I told Clark the assistant U.S. Attorney is not to stay in the office. As to Assistant Attorney General Miller, head of the criminal division, I told Clark that Miller is a reasonable man and friendly to the Bureau, and he should not hesitate to consult with him on any legal matters, but that here again it was unnecessary and undesirable for Miller to take up headquarters in our office. Clark said he had already told the Assistant U.S. Attorney that it would not be possible for him to sit in on the conferences, and he would also advise the U.S. Attorney. Some inter-office politics going on here, right? All right. Urgent, 11/26/63. Re-URAD, 9:25 p.m., November 25 last. Immediately interview Salisbury to determine if he's acquainted with Ruby and determine if he has information concerning shooting of Oswald. Salisbury who? Next one, November 25th, 1963, 9:25 p.m. To Director in SAC Dallas from SAC Baltimore. Jack Leon Ruby, a.k.a. Jack Rubenstein, Lee Harvey Oswald, et al. Extreme care should be used in reporting following information due to highly confidential nature of source. About 9:25 p.m. on November 24 last, Julius Salisbury and several other unknown individuals were watching television concerning death of President Kennedy. Salisbury is owner of Oasis nightclub and backer of a number of operations in Baltimore. Pam Gail, Gail, striptease dancer at Oasis, asked Salisbury if he knew Rubenstein. Salisbury indicated he knew him. Pam asked why he killed him, and Salisbury replied that they ought to give him a medal. Pam asked whether he, apparently Rubenstein, would not stand trial. Salisbury used some obscenities in replying. Stand what trial? Wasting the people's time and money? Obscene should have died. Informant had no further details and no further comments were made indicating how Salisbury knew Rubenstein. Although direct contact with Salisbury could be endanger the source, it is believed that this danger could be minimized by contacts of other nightclub owners in the area. Bureau permission is therefore requested to contact Salisbury along with other nightclub owners concerning any knowledge they may have about Rubenstein. The quote syndicate in Chicago. Udell recalled Ruby was a partner of Harry Epstein in a punchboard business. All right, so for some reason we have a duplicate here from a different memo entirely. All right, moving on. We have another one, 11/25/63. As Hal Collins has stated, he is a close personal friend of Ruby's. He should be immediately recontacted, thoroughly interviewed to fully develop any information he may possess regarding Ruby's Background and Associates, Sutel Bureau, and Dallas, ensuring Dallas is furnished original information set forth in Retell. 11/25/63, assassination of President Kennedy, Dallas, Texas, November 22, 1963, AFO. At 9:30 p.m. instant, Hal Collins telephonically contacted San Diego Police Department, stated he desired to make a statement concerning Jack Ruby. SDPD relayed information. This officer, Collins, was telephonically contacted at home of his sister-in-law, La Jolla, California. Who else is in and around La Jolla, California? Come on, you guys know this. Lauren Hall, of course. Collins identified himself as being the brother of Mrs. Robert Clark, sister-in-law of Justice Tom Clark. Collins had indicated to SDPD that he was from Dallas, Texas, and mentioned the names of his good friends John F. Kennedy and Lyndon B. Johnson. Collins advised this office that he desired to make a statement tonight concerning Jack Ruby. He stated he's been a close personal friend of Ruby's for many years. He described him as a hero worshiper in love with a hero. John F. Kennedy, good guy, always a gentleman, sincere, intellectual. And the shooting was his own idea. Collins stated, in his opinion, Ruby shot Oswald on impulse because of his personal animosity over the assassination of President Kennedy. He stated that it was obvious that Ruby waited until all evidence against Oswald was in before making his move. Collins stated he was both surprised and startled over Ruby's action on this matter. Collins advised that he resides at 2713 Via Casa Loma, San Clemente, California. For information of the Bureau, at the beginning of the interview, Collins stated that he wanted to make a public statement immediately concerning the shooting of Oswald. He was advised that anything he stated to the Bureau was not a public statement. He said he considered the above information to be pertinent, and he wanted it known that he made such a statement concerning Ruby. He was asked if he had any further information concerning the shooting of Oswald, and he replied he did not. For further info, Collins appeared to have been drinking, and background noise during a telephone conversation would indicate he was attending some sort of party. At one point during the conversation, Collins discovered that his wife, Marion Collins, was on the telephone extension. When she corrected him on a statement he was making, and Collins became very upset with his wife and told her to get the hell off the line. In view of Collins' statement that he has no further information to furnish, and since he appeared throughout conversation to be attempting to give testimonial for Ruby, and in view of indication he'd been drinking, no attempt will be made to re-interview him. All right, November 25th, 1963, to the director in Dallas from Washington Field Office. Bureau Tel to all offices, November 25 instant, Dallas and Bureau Tel calls to WFO today, Chicago Tel to director in Dallas at 11:22 p.m., November 24 last. Washington Field Office contained no information identifiable with Ruby or indicating he was ever in D.C., Ruby unknown to Washington Field Office gambling informants. One Jack Rubenstein mentioned in HCUA reports not identifiable with subject. HCUA reports mentioning name Jack Rubenstein concerned hearings on Young Communist League. WFO files reflect Jack Rubenstein, who was organizer for CIO textile workers in New Jersey in 51, was member of National Board of Young Communist League in 28. Miss Virginia Carroll, Passport Office, State Department, advised S.A. Kenneth J. looks like Haser, Haser today, that files reflect no record of a request or refusal for a passport for subject. Post files and other logical records from U.S. Embassy, Havana, Cuba, were checked by S.A. Haser with Assistant State Department employee Donald J. Simon, and no record of subject located. Reporter John W. Mashek, M-A-S-H-E-K, Dallas Morning News, who reportedly has information regarding a subject or victim recently obtaining money in Chicago, not available for immediate interview due to funeral service for president, will immediately interview when available. All right, November 25th, reference Philadelphia. All available sources and informants of Philadelphia Division in a position to furnish some info pertaining to gambling activities have been contacted on November 25 and were unable to furnish any info re Jack Leon Ruby, his background, or his associates. Remainder of gambling informants being contacted is available, and any positive info developed will be furnished Dallas in form suitable for dissemination. $11.25.63. Rebutel, all SACs, November 25th instant. Redacted, Texas Liquor Control Board, TLCB. Then a long redaction is probably an address, El Paso. Today advised me he met Jack Ruby in Dallas, Texas about 8 years ago, at which time he, redacted, was doing undercover work for the TLCB. This was in connection with Ruby's operation of a nightclub on South Hervey Street in Dallas. He advised Ruby also operated the Vegas Club in Dallas. Redacted stated he did not know Ruby very well, but in the course of his business, which later was an open inspector, he got to know Ruby and speak to him casually. Redacted advised he knew of no law enforcement or political contacts of Ruby, nor did he know or hear of any subversive connections of Ruby. He advised he never heard Ruby express any radical or extremist views, and also advised that he has never seen Lee Harvey Oswald or heard Ruby mention him. Redacted advised Ruby always seemed pleasant, and that he, Redacted, never saw or heard Ruby becoming violent. Redacted stated that Ruby was in trouble with the TLCB on one occasion that he can recall, which he believes occurred in 1955 or 1956. He believed that this was for selling or permitting consumption of beer after hours. Redacted could not recall the name of the club involved, but stated that the record may still be in the Dallas district office. He advised the TLCB is only required to keep records for 2 years, but needs approval from Austin, Texas before destroying any records. He advised that the Dallas district office may have a copy of a personal history form on Ruby, which, though not mandatory, he believes the Dallas district required when receiving an application for a beer and wine license. Redacted advised he knows of no associates, friends, or employees of Ruby now in the El Paso area. He stated that one Joe Bond, who formerly operated a club in Dallas, possibly the Blue Bonnet, apparently is a friend of Ruby's. He advised that in 1955 or 56, he raided Bond's club and Ruby showed up to take the club money from Bond to deposit in the bank. He believed Bond was put in the Dallas City jail on a charge of selling beer after hours. He stated that he heard that Bond jumped Bond and was later arrested in Washington, D.C., running another club. Redacted advised that, long redaction, a full name, of the TLCB, who worked for a short time in Dallas, who now resides in El Paso, might possibly know something about Ruby. All right, so they're going to interview that guy in El Paso. Redacted, TLCB, El Paso. Advised on November 25th instant that he worked in Dallas for 7 or 8 months as an open inspector in 1957. He advised that he knew Ruby casually through contacts in the performance of his duties. He advised that he knew nothing of Ruby's friends, associates, law enforcement, or political contacts, subversive connections, or other background. He advised that Ruby tried to give the impression that he could be tough if he had to be. He stated he did not know Oswald and had never seen him. Redacted suggested that the following individuals might know Ruby or have information regarding his associates, background, and friends. The Campisi phonetic brothers who operate the Egyptian Lounge. Oh, like, what's his name? Joe Campisi. And then L.L. Newman, former Dallas district director for the TLCB, no longer employed by them, residing in Dallas. Red Sutter, Dallas PD Intelligence Division. Joe Russell Yatt, Farmersville, Texas, Dallas PD character who knows many Dallas characters. Wilson advised he's never met or seen Oswald. No specific leads being set out for Dallas since El Paso does not know the extent of the Dallas investigation. However, it is suggested that they might wish to contact the Dallas district office of the TLCB. Joe Bond, the Campisi brothers, L.L. Newman, Red Sutter, and Joe Russell Wyatt. All right, so I think I'm going to call it here for today. We'll pick up here tomorrow. And thank you guys for tuning in and being patient as we go through these ample amount of documents on Jack Ruby. So thanks, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow.